Hi, I'm Kent. If you look behind me, there's actually a bunch of pots sitting on my shelf. Those have all been bisque fired, which means it's time to glaze them. However, I'm running a little bit low on glaze. I was looking at making some more, and in doing so, I realized I needed to tweak some of the recipes. I started making my glaze myself. I've been using Joe Thompson's floating glaze, and I really liked how it's been going so far. However, when I was looking at the recipe a little bit more closely, I noticed I have a few problems. So let's see if we can figure them out. So here are a couple of test tiles I made using Joe's recipe. They're a very pretty blue color, which is the cobalt, and the green, which is the copper. The copper has a little bit of pinholes in it. I don't know if you can see it on camera. Oh, yeah, there you go. You can see it in the reflection. I'm not sure exactly what caused that, so I'm going to just give that another shot and see what happens. The blue looks like it worked pretty well. However, one of the signatures of this recipe is actually does a phase separation, so it winds up with this nice variegated color. And that didn't happen with my glaze. I've made several pots with this glaze in particular, and most of them have come out basically the same. So I went back and read the recipe to make more glaze, and Joe had a few suggestions on how to change this. One is to apply the glaze thicker. I don't think that's the problem. I put the glaze on at different application levels, and it seems to be more or less stable. Another is to fire at a different temperature. I don't really want to do that if I can. And the last one was to add more titanium dioxide. So from my understanding, the titanium dioxide acts as an opacifier, but I think it also does something with this floating chemistry that I don't quite understand. Definitely not an expert in glaze chemistry, and I'm basically just flying blind here based upon Joe's recommendations. Joe points to some great resources where he learned his material. I haven't dug into that yet. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to take the blue that I have mixed up already, the green, which is the copper I have mixed up already, and recently I made another version of this that's using a mason stain. So I'm going to take all three of those, dip a test tile in it using the original amount of titanium dioxide, and then bump up the titanium dioxide a couple more times. We'll then fire it and see how it goes. So here are my 3 containers of glaze. I'm running low, so I don't feel bad messing around with these. I can always make some more. So I have the cobalt, the copper, and the mason stain, that's the teal color. I just mixed all these up with my immersion blender. So now I'm going to dip some test tiles, and these are basically controls. These are the originals. So the idea is to take a test tile, and then have it go for a swim. That's the cobalt original. Same thing for the copper. And then last but not least, my mason stain teal. All right, all of those have been dipped for about 5 seconds. So the right way to do this would be mix up new glaze from scratch, but I am not going to do that. In general, I'm looking for relative effects when I mess with my glazes or my clay bodies. I know how much water I put in these originally, so I'm going to basically back that out to figure out how much dry ingredients are left. I will then add some more titanium dioxide based upon that. So I'm going to do some math off screen and figure that out. I now know how many dry ingredients are in each of these different glazes, and I pulled out my titanium dioxide. So now I'm going to measure out additional titanium dioxide in each of these. The original recipe called for 2.5% by dry weight. I'm going to go up by 1% more twice. So I'm going to get to 3.5 and 4.5%. And that goes in the first one. All right, now I have enough titanium dioxide to get all these up to 3.5% instead of the 2.5% original. So I'm going to use my immersion blender and blend these up really well. Okay, these are all mixed up with their additional titanium dioxide. Do the same thing and dip some more test tiles. All right, those are done. So one more time, add some more titanium dioxide and dip the last set. I recently switched over to these deli containers and I really like them. When they're about half full, I can just put my immersion blender in them and I don't have to worry about glaze splashing out, which is really nice. And they fit my small cups as well as my test tiles. So I think I'll be using more of these. All right, I just measured out the last of the titanium dioxide and dumped it in. I'm going to mix it up again. If you were paying really close attention when I first measured these out, they all had slightly different amounts, and that's because there's slightly different amounts of glaze in each of these. And last set of test tiles. All right, so now I'm done with the glaze, so I'll put it back away. I'm going to add to all these labels that I added more titanium dioxide. There we go, that was upside down for you. You probably can't read my handwriting, but now I've labeled that they all have 4.5% titanium dioxide instead of the original recipe, which had 2.5. All right, here they all are. So these are the cobalt, the copper, and the mason stain, going from the original 2.5% in the back, 3.5%, and 4.5%. Now, the different colors I can tell once they're fired. I'm not sure if I'll be able to tell apart the different amounts of titanium dioxide. So I'm going to use my underglaze pencil here and scribble on the bottom real quick some marks so that I can tell them apart. So 2.5, 3.5, and 4.5. All right, and there's the last one. All right, cool. So I'm going to let these dry the rest of the way, and they will go into my next glaze firing. And at that point, we'll know what extra titanium dioxide does. All the test tiles came out of the glaze kiln. So this is the cobalt, this is the copper, and this is the one with mason stain. I had a little bit of surprise here with this copper one. Here are my original test tiles. The cobalt looks basically the same. I was able to get rid of the pinholes in the copper, but it fired yellow for some reason. I don't remember exactly where this is in the kiln, but I think it was actually in the corner where it's next to two elements. So I'm wondering if this one just got to a higher temperature and that caused the yellow. As I'll show you in a second, the other ones didn't go yellow. Top here is relatively similar to the original test tile. And then the last one is the mason stain, and it came out like the pots I fired. So what about bumping up the amount of titanium dioxide? So here's the cobalt, and I don't know if you can see this well on camera. There we go, and I think maybe you can see a little bit better. So this is the one with the additional titanium dioxide, and this is the original. It actually has much more of the effect I was looking for. There's these kind of light little speckles. Next up is the copper. So the first difference is it didn't fire as yellow. And I don't notice as much of the floating effect in this one as I do in the cobalt one. So I don't know if that's just a result of the copper recipe or something with my firing. And the last one is the additional titanium dioxide in the mason stain. So again, here is the 3.5% versus the 2.5% in the base recipe. I don't notice a huge amount of difference between these two. They're slightly different colors, but I don't really see the floating effect any more prominent in the higher one. All right, so this is the original 2.5%, 3.5%, and then I did 4.5%. And here, I think even on camera, you can see the difference here. This one has gone almost purple. So there's a little bit of an effect here at 3.5% and much more of an effect at 4.5%. Actually, I really like this one. I don't think it is the intention of the glaze, but I think it's a cool trick to have. For the copper, somewhat similar, it has gone even more pale. And so you can see some of the white texture. So if you compare these two together, it's more pronounced with a darker blue, but I think it's showing up in the green as well. And so the last one is the mason stain one with 4.5% titanium dioxide. This one is a bit of a surprise. This one actually turned a different color. I've never seen a mason stain glaze turn a different color. Now, granted, I haven't done this a lot, but it almost has this, I don't know, maybe purple or brownish tint to it. However, on the other side, that's not true. It's actually the darker greens in the bottom. And here they are all together. So how much titanium dioxide am I going to be putting into my glaze in the future? I think for the cobalt, I'm going to go ahead and bump it up. For the others, I'm less certain. I've used my copper floating glaze much less, and I think I just have some more experiments to do with that. And for the mason stain, I actually don't see a huge amount of difference. There's some interesting color variations between these, but I don't see any more of a floating effect. That's how it goes sometimes. I was expecting some more grand conclusions out of this and some obvious wins, but it didn't quite turn out that way. I think for the cobalt it did. For the other two, less so. I can actually just stick with the base recipe and play around with it some more. Joe has a few other recipes that use the same 5 base ingredients, so I'm going to play around with those. One is just a straight up gloss glaze, and another one's a matte glaze. I haven't played with those yet, so I'm going to mix up some batches of those in the future, and I also then see what happens when I add these different colorants to them. Both the oxides as well as mason stains. When I do that, we can then compare against all of these as well. I hope you found that interesting. If you have any questions or comments, let me know. Thanks.